So the question is about requiring a certain sequence of solvers to trigger either a long output or a short output. So this example is going to be very simplistic, just to, because the purpose is to understand how do you require solvers to fire off, a long or short in a certain sequence, right? For this demonstration, I'm just going to use the slope of these moving averages, right? So more specifically here, right, we're going to make sure that the fastest moving average is going to roll over and so right here it'd be rolling over and sloping downward first, and then the middle moving average, it will roll over and slope down second, and then the slower moving average is going to roll over and slope down last, right? So the slope of these different moving averages, need to occur in the exact sequence. Now, we've done similar topics in the past where we require the moving averages to be stacked in a certain order, right? So in other words, the faster moving average has to be on top, the middle one in the middle, and the slower moving average, on the bottom, right? Requiring that the moving averages are stacked, whereas like over here, right, the moving averages aren't stacked in the correct order. So we've done, topics like that. We've also done topics to make sure that all the moving averages are sloping in the same direction together, regardless of the sequence, just to make sure that they are all sloping up together, or to make sure that all the moving averages are sloping down together, right? So that's another different topic. So, but in this one, we're going to get, this one's going to get more detailed, more specific in that the slope of each moving average has to occur in a certain sequence, right? So for example, like over here, right, we can see the faster one, it starts sloping up and then it rolls over, but there's a good chance, maybe not here, but we'll just have to pretend like the slower moving average didn't start sloping up. If it was still sloping down, right, the faster one rolled over and was sloping down, but the slower one was already sloping down, so that was out of sequence, right? Because basically the slower one was sloping down first, and the faster one, it rolled up and it rolled over. All right, so it's out of sequence there. All right, so with that kind of a beginning introduction, let me build some slope solvers, and then we can kind of visualize this a little bit better. So, all right, so let's get BloodHound open, and let's put in today's file name here. So, all right, the 21st already. Okay, so now that we have a file name in BloodHound, now our work will get saved to this file. So let's start working on the logic tab here, and we're going to create a new logic template so that we can start working on the logic board. Well, all right, maybe I'll come up with a better name later on there, but yeah, right. Anyways, we're looking for a specific sequence of solvers. So, okay, so let's just build our 3 slope solvers that we're going to use for this example here. Okay, and I am using EMAs. All right, so let's replace the input here, replace the SMA with the EMA, and scroll down. There's our EMA, and I'm using a 25 for the fastest moving average, a 50 for the medium, and an 80 for the slower. All right, so there's our first one. And to build the others real quickly, I'm going to switch over to the solvers tab and make 2 copies like so, and then adjust the name, and then also adjust the indicator period. So let's open that up and adjust the period up top here. Click OK, and then go down and adjust our last one. So I want this to be an 80 period, and adjust the period over there to 80. There we go. All right, so now I have 3 slope solvers, matching the 3 EMAs on my chart. So, all right, now let's go back to the logic board, and I can go to my existing nodes now, and there's the other 2 solvers. So let's drop that one on the board. Go back to existing nodes and drop the last one on the board. There. Okay, so looking at the chart, right, we can see that the EMA 25, it rolls over a little early, but doesn't look like the other 2 are. But it does finally roll over here. So let's mark it. Yeah, let me mark it there. And then the EMA 50, we can see it rolls over a bar later, right? So there it is. And I'll just drag that down a little bit. And then the EMA 80 takes a little bit longer, and then it finally rolls over right there. There. All right, so here we go. So here's our sequence, right? The faster EMA rolls over first. The medium EMA, right, rolls over next, 1 bar later. And then the slower EMA, right, rolls over last, a few bars later, right? And so we want to make sure that this happens in sequence. Okay, so let's see here. So we're going to need to spread these apart here. All right. Now, how do we make sure that, right, I don't want to call it first solver, that our first condition occurs first, right? So, the EMA 25, right, that's our first solver, that needs to change directions first. So how do we know that this one's changing first? Let's plug that in, right? And let's go over here, for example. Let's scroll a little further. Yeah, so we can see here, right, it rolls over right there, rolls up, and then, but actually, I don't want to focus on that. Let's focus on when it rolls down, right? So here we go, it slopes down. And if we look at the others, well, right, the middle EMA is already sloping down. And of course, the slower one is definitely sloping down as well, right? So, right, so when the faster rolls over, right, it's definitely out of sequence because the other 2 have already rolled over a long time ago, right? So how do we make sure that, right, that the first condition is first? Well, as we just saw, we check the other conditions, right? So we have to check the other 2 EMAs and make sure that they are not rolled over yet. So what we're going to have to do is join those together into an OR node, like so. And then we can look at this OR node, and we can see that, yep, so either the slower or the medium has already rolled over. And every once in a while, like if we check right here, right, we can see, well, the medium one has started to roll up, but the slower one is still rolling down, right? It's still sloping down. The medium one slopes up, so we get both of this, right? But the point is that we still have a short, we still have a short output, So when we're looking at this faster moving average here, which rolled down, if we have a short output from this OR node, then that's telling us that one of the other solvers has already occurred first, right? Or is currently, sloping down. So we're at a sequence there. But let's see here. Yeah. Well, I just kind of lost my little train of thought here. Oh, right. So what we're looking for is on this bar here. So when the first condition, when the first solver, when it changes directions first, right? So again, this EMA, needs to be the first in sequence, right? We need to make sure that there is no short output from the other two, right? The other two can't have a short output yet. So if we see this short output, then we know things are out of sequence, right? So we're going to have to combine, right, our first condition, right, with the other two condition, right? But the other two need to be inverted because, right, if they have a short output, that is wrong. So we want the other two to either have no output or a long output, right? Anything but a short output. So what that means is that we're going to need a inverter function node, right? So we need to go to our function nodes and get an inverter. And we need to invert this OR node. Or what we could do is a little shortcut. This probably doesn't get used a lot, but there's a inverter built into the logic nodes, right, which is called a NOT. So in Boolean logic, it's called a NOT. So it just means invert. So we can enable that, and right, if we look right here, if we invert it, then now there's no short output. Right, there's no short output now. So if we look at this AND node and then connect our OR node in, right, look right here, the bar in question, there is no output right there. Right, that output's missing. And here, let me adjust things just a little bit here. There we go. Right. So, since there's no output here, right, there's no output, there's no short output, it's now stripped out. Whereas if we disconnect the OR node, right, look, we're getting our short output when the faster EMA reverses down, right? But the other two have already reversed down. They're already sloping downward. So we want this sloping downward to strip out or block this short output when the faster EMA slopes downward. And so that's what our OR node is doing there, right? So again, we're looking at the actual slope of the other two solvers, and then we're inverting it, right? So again, this OR node, we enabled the NOT to invert it. So, and also you can look at the name. So the name of the OR node will change. It says NOT. So that's how you know that a logic node has been inverted, is because it'll say NOT. Like this AND node, if we enable the NOT, it'll say NOT AND node. Right? So All right, let's undo that. All right. So basically, when our faster EMA, right, reverses down, if any of the other two are already sloping down, then our output's is going to be prevented. Now, if we scroll back, right? So remember back here, right? There's the arrow. There's the arrow for our faster, right? It reverses down this bar, and we get this short output because the other two slope solvers are still sloping up, right? So that tells us that the faster EMA did actually slope down first because the other two are still sloping up, right? So now we can take this and then put it into, let's put it into a toggle node here. And so the toggle node is going to turn on, and at some point, yeah, we're going to need to be able to turn this toggle node off at some point, right? And yeah, basically we can simply put, we can turn this toggle node off once the second solver slopes downward as well, right? So once the second solver in our sequence, right, produces its short output, then afterwards we can turn this toggle node off, right? So okay, so let's take a look at our EMA 50, right? So to make sure that, right, our second solver is firing off second in the sequence here, well, we need the first solver to have already, right, fired off a signal. So, and that's what our toggle node's for, right? Our toggle node is holding on to the first solver's, change, right? So yeah, I guess that's probably the best way to phrase this, right? Is each of these solvers need to change direction in sequence here, right? So the toggle node is holding on to the first solver, changing direction, right? So to make sure that the EMA 50, our second solver, is the second one, well, the toggle node needs to have, needs to have an output, already in place, right? There needs to be an output with the toggle node. So, and then we can combine an AND node. So we can take our toggle node and the other solver here, right, our second slope solver, and combine it into an AND node. Right. And so there we go, right? So our first slope solver, right, reversed down first, and now the second slope solver has reversed down secondly, right? And we're getting a short output on this. So, all right, so now we need to go back to turning off this toggle node. So the way we're going to do this is we're going to use a look back, right? And the reason why we're using a look back is because we want this 1 bar delay, right? So the look back, the default setting has a displacement of 1. So think of that as like a 1 bar delay. A 1 bar delay, or you're pushing the signal forward in time by 1 bar. Depends on your perspective here. So, all right, so I'm going to call this a displacement 1 here. And so if we put that, right, our second solver into the look back, and then the look back goes to the reset there. So now, if we look at our toggle node, oh, sorry, okay, yeah, we need to go set up the reset section here for our toggle node. So, so this look back, right? Let's take a look at the look back here. So what we want to focus on is, right, this is the bar where the second solver, right, slope solver, rolls over, right, and produces a short output. But we can see down here that it's delayed by 1 bar, right? Our short output is actually on the next bar, right? So we're going to use this short output to turn the toggle node off. So let's connect the toggle node up. And so what does the toggle node, the toggle node's output right now is a short output, right? Because again, the first slope solver rolled over and is now sloping down, right, back on this bar. So we need to turn this short output off from the toggle node. And we know that a short signal is going into the reset, right? So again, we can look at this, right? So right here, right? So right here is our short output going into the toggle node. And so for the reset, we're going to use the on signal because what's coming out of the toggle node is a short, and what's going into the reset connector is a short. So, right, so it's not an opposite signal, right? It's the same signal going in. So we're going to use the reset on signal to turn off the toggle node. And there we have it. All right, so there we go. The toggle node turns off when the look back produces a short signal, right? So there you go. So that's our look back again, right? And so it produces a short signal there. And if we look at the toggle node, right, the toggle node gets turned on and then it gets turned off, right? So again, what's turning our toggle node off? Well, it's our second solver, right? The solver that needs to be second in the sequence, right? So the first solver of our sequence, you know, when it changes output, right? It gets first it gets filtered through this AND node, right? Making sure that the other solvers haven't already, aren't already going in that direction, haven't already, haven't already occurred first. So, right. So the AND node basically, kind of pre-checks our first solver, that our first solver is the first one to fire off first. Right. And then, right, goes into the toggle node. And then, right, the toggle node, which is our first, right, requirement, combined with the AND node and the second solver there. So if we look at our AND node, right, there we go. So we have a signal when the second slope solver, right, changes directions. And then we only get a signal on this 1 bar because, remember, the toggle node gets turned off afterwards, right? So toggle node's on and then it gets turned off, right? Which is good, because when we're looking at this AND node, right, it's a lot cleaner if we just have a single signal here. So now we can put this AND node into a toggle node. So let's put this one into a toggle node. Okay. And so now this toggle node, right, it turns on, right, it turns on, and of course, you know, it's going to stay on forever, basically, until we turn it off, right? And we can use basically the same logic that we did back here to turn this toggle node off, right? So let's grab another look back node. And so, right, so this is our third solver, right, for the third, solver to change directions. So let's put that into the look back and connect that into the reset. And let's also rename this one because, again, we're using the displacement of 1 right there. All right. And then on our toggle node, we need to also go into the reset on signal section and set this to force off as well, right? So this toggle node settings, right? It's force on, force off, no action, right? So it's the same as our second toggle node. Force on, force off, no action, right? And now if we look at the chart, look, there we go. Remember, I put this arrow here for the slower EMA. So right on that arrow is when the slower EMA rolls over as well, right? So there we go. That toggle node turns on, right? So when our second EMA rolls over, the toggle node turns on, and then it waits for the last slope solver, right, to roll over, which is on this arrow. And then the toggle node gets turned off, right, on the bar afterwards. Okay. So we just have one more step to do, which is grab another AND node. On a AND node. There we go. Connect that toggle node into the AND node and connect our third solver in. Here, let's clean that up a little bit. There. So if we look at this AND node, right, there we have it. So, right, so the first slope solver reverses down first, the second solver reverses down second, and the third one reverses down third, and we get a signal right there. Right? So now let's look forward on the chart. Right? And so here we have a long. Let's take a look. Let's analyze this long. So, all right. So we know that the faster one definitely has reversed up back over here. Right. Let's connect that in. There we go. Right. Let's get rid of all that. All right, so let's mark this. All right, so there we go. So our faster EMA, right, reverses up on this bar. And then our second slope solver, there we go. It reverses up right there. And our third slope solver, the EMA 80, there, it reverses up there. So there we go. They're in sequence, right? The faster reverses up first, the medium reverses up second, and the slower reverses up last. And so if we look at this AND node, right, there we go. There's our long signal right there. So that's in sequence. There. Now, when they start reversing down again, right, we don't have a short. So apparently, these EMAs are reversing down out of sequence. So let's check that out. Okay, so let's see. So there's our first one. Let's mark that. Actually, yeah, that's okay. We'll mark that one. Oh, that's actually here. So that's for the faster EMA. And now let's check our slower, I'm sorry, the medium EMA. And that actually reverses down on the same bar, right? So the faster and the medium, they both reverse down on the same bar together. So it must be the slower EMA. All right, yeah. So here we go. The slower EMA reversed down, 3 bars or 4 bars sooner, 4 bars earlier. So there we go. So they were out of sequence. Okay. And so, yep, this long definitely, that's pretty easy to see. Yeah, that looks correct there. Now, when they reverse down, let's see, it must be the slower one. Yeah, so the EMA 80 probably, I bet, reversed down first again. So there we go. Let's check one of the others. Yeah, so there you go. The middle moving average, it reversed down 1 bar later than the slower one. Right. Okay. All right. Yeah, these look correct. You can just eyeball that. And yep, that looks correct. Let's see. All right, so when these reversed downward, let's see. All right. So that is the slower. That's our slower EMA. Reverse down there. And yep, the medium one, again, was 1 bar late. So the middle EMA, yep, reverse down 1 bar late. Okay. And yeah, we can just kind of eyeball this. Yeah, that looks correct. Oh. Yeah, so let's check this sloping down there. Yeah, a lot of choppiness going on there. So okay. So these are kind of some of the details of what you got to think about. So here's a situation where all 3 moving averages all slope down together on the same bar. So there was no sequence, right? They all just, right, moved down together. So it wasn't like 1 bar after the next, right? They all did it together, right? So, depending on, the exact requirements, we can see that basically if all the moving averages, if all, I shouldn't be specifically saying moving averages, but if all 3 solvers, fire off on the same bar, right, they all produce a short together on the same bar, then there's no signal here, right? And that's because of the specifically how, yeah, it's because of this requirement here. So this, yeah, so this OR node and this extra AND node, yeah, is, it's requiring that the others haven't fired off yet. Yeah, so I'm just kind of wondering to myself, thinking to myself, if there's a way that we could allow that. Yeah, I think so. So let's see if this will actually work. So if I disconnect the OR node and put a 1 bar delay in there, so maybe this 1 bar delay might work, without creating any unexpected kind of side effects here. Right, so there's our signal right there with all three, right, all three solvers, basically firing off a short together. So there's that. But now we need to kind of look back and see if there was any ill side effects. Yeah, let's see. Oh, it does appear to be working. So good. All right. So our slower EMA, right, which is our third solver for the third sequence, right, it rolls over first, and then the faster slope solver rolls over a bar later, and I think the medium one, right, yeah, so both the fastest and the medium, right, solvers roll over 1 bar later, and there's no short signal there. All right, so it does appear to be working. Yeah, let's look back here. So there's no short signal back here either. So that's good. Right, this short still works, obviously. Oh, let's see what we have here. Wow. Boy, this is a bit of a mess here. All right. So we have a little table here. Okay, so the first row is our first solver here, right? The faster EMA. Yeah, so we get. Yeah, all right, so the faster one, let's see, right? So it reverses up, but the other two nodes are already in a long state. So they're out of sequence. Let's see, all right. And then the faster EMA, let's roll that down, there we go. Faster EMA, our first slope solver, right? It produces a short output. But then the second one is a long, which is good, but the third one is already in a short. So that cancels that one out. Yeah. So here, so cancel that and cancel that. All right, so then our first solver is in a long, but the second solver has already been in a long. So, right, so that's not in sequence. That cancels that out. Okay, then our first solver goes short. second solver then goes short because it was in a long and then it reversed short. And the third slope solver goes from long to short together. So bingo. All right. So we have a, they're not in sequence, but they're all together. And the same thing over here. So the first slope solver goes long, and then the second one reverses long, and the third one reverses long together as well. So we got a winner and a winner. All right, so let's check our output. And yeah, so that's all correct. All right. So, yeah, all right. So that basically does it right there. Yeah. One kind of little side topic on this is this would have been a little easier to comprehend if we weren't using slope solvers, right? So using a slope solver, makes it a little more confusing because a slope solver always has an output, right? So a moving average is either sloping up or sloping down. It could be flat, so there might be 1 or 2 bars, right, where the moving average is flat, but for the most part, right, 99% of the time, it's always sloping up or sloping down, right? So you're always having an output, so it does make it, analyzing this a little more complex. I could have simplified this logic if I had used inflection solvers instead. Let's zoom in here. All right, so let's do a let's see. This is the EMA 25. There. Let's put in the EMA 25. Like so. Right. Right. So again, so looking at the chart, right, we have a continuous long, and then maybe a short, continuous long, continuous short, right? But if we were dealing with something a little simpler, such as just a single signal when the EMA reverses direction, right? That would be a lot easier to visualize and kind of comprehend what's going on, because what would happen is, like back over here, right, we would see the individual bars on which the EMA reversed rolled over, changed direction on, right? Right, so we just see a single short, right, on the first bar where the faster EMA rolled over, right? And of course, if I had an inflection solver, for the middle EMA, we would see a single signal, right? There would just be one signal on this bar where my cursor's at, right? So visually, looking at this, it would have been a lot easier if I could have used all inflection solvers, which I could have. And that also would have eliminated the need for this AND node and OR node if the solvers that we needed in sequence only produced an output, on one individual bar, right? That would simplify the logic, right? But, you never know what solvers you might be using, so if you're using like a threshold solver, maybe a threshold solver is your second solver in the sequence that needs to fire off, right? Well, that threshold solver is going to look a lot like the slope solver. A threshold solver quite often produces, a continuous sequence of outputs in a row, right? So it's going to look kind of similar to a slope solver, so that, so if you're using something like a a threshold solver or a comparison solver, or any of the other solvers, a support resistance or the regression solvers. You're going to be dealing with continuous outputs, right? And you can't necessarily boil them all down to a solver that just produces a single signal on the condition you're looking for. So just to throw some tips out there, if you were using a threshold, if the threshold was a part of one of your sequences, what is the threshold looking for? Well, it's looking for your indicator to cross into a certain value, right? So for example, are you looking at the MACD crossing the zero line? Is the MACD above or below the zero line? And you would use the threshold solver for that. But what you're really interested in is when the MACD crosses the zero line. That is your sequence of events. So you could use the crossover solver instead of the threshold solver to give you that individual signal when the condition occurs. And so again, so you could use the crossover solver to identify the exact bar the MACD is crossing above the zero line and goes positive, right? Or when the MACD crosses below the zero line, right? So quite often, if the threshold, is a part of your sequence, you could use the crossover solver to determine when your indicator, crosses that threshold value, crosses into it or crosses out of it. You could use, a crossover solver, or you might need two crossover solvers, right? So like if you're using the stochastics indicator in the threshold solver, right? And you're looking when the stochastics crosses into 80 or crosses into 20, that would be two separate crossover values. So you'd need two crossover solvers. As far as the comparison solvers, if the comparison is a part of your logic there, for the most part, they're really, for comparison, a crossover might be able to replace a comparison solver in very specific situations, but there really is no substitute for the comparison solver to get, a discrete signal when your comparison occurs. So this more, complex logic design here will work for the vast majority of cases there. And so this example has 1, 2, and 3 solvers, creating a sequence. If you had, say, like, we had a fourth one here, if there was a fourth solver there in your sequence, right? Basically, you just take this design here, and just keep repeating this design further down, right? So you got this design here. So if you have more than just 3 solvers that need to be in sequence, if you have 4 or 5, you just repeat this logic here. Just keep repeating it for as many solvers in your sequence that you need, that you're looking for. All right, I think that about does it.